Welcome, Sister Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are a dear. Let's keep that thing out, would you? Oh, you are wonderful. Sit down, sit down, sit down. Before we do anything, I want you to tell me the impressions that you'll take home. Give me an impression, Dick. What will you remember? I'll tell you what I remember, and I've seen this thing over and over. I remember those teenage black kids being prodded and not doing anything back. I will always remember that. Irish, we don't do that well. What will you take home?
Well, what I really, the ending is what I'm taking home. It was success, you know. It worked.
It worked. But boy, it took a lot of people.
That's right.
But it worked. Congress, from March, when all this happened, until August, when the Voting Rights Bill passed, that's the speed of light in Washington.
That's right.
Try to get that speed going today. Ho, ho. What will you take home? Come on, Daffy.
Oh, gosh.
Give me a memory.
Just the fact that it was successfully, peacefully done, as you said.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
And there was no
fighting.
There was no Ferguson.
Yeah.
No.
What do you remember?
What I remember, it makes me think that today across the country in state legislatures, there is a systematic push on to take away the voting rights of people,
right.
of minorities, people of color.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
and Congress has refused to take positive action this year on voting rights. And the challenge today is all the progress that was achieved.
That's right.
And as a reporter, I lived through a lot of
Yeah.
that in Washington, D.C. with wire service. We have a real challenge today, and I want to know what you think we can do to preserve the voting rights.
Yeah. And I am so unimaginative about things to do. But I will remember when President Obama was first nominated, somebody in Kansas City, because they knew I'd been in Selma. They said, "Did you expect anything like this?" And I said, "Of course." I mean, back then, anything was possible. But then I said, that man is standing on the shoulders of giants and their teenage kids. Those young people. Oh. I'd like to know, how can we get that kind of thing going among our young? We're getting tired, but it's true. I don't know. What are you going to take home? Give me a. Oh, come on, Mary Margaret.
I'm taking home that all of our sisters, you and Ernest Marie and our clergy, were such an inspiration, and those were the days when the laity were not encouraged in the Catholic Church, and you all paved the way for us, and here we are.
We were terribly lucky. We were the first. Nuns had not done things like that. And if you noticed, when the meeting of clergy was happening at the Chancery office, the horror of Bloody Sunday, which was March the 7th, beaten and all that had gotten captured on TV. In 1965, TV was new. And across the nation, we saw our fellow citizens getting beaten and clobbered, and that just started it going. So the Cardinal, what's his name?
Ritter.
Walked into the meeting with the priest, and he said, Ritter said, "Well, what are we going to do about Selma?" And Father Doyle said, "We're going." He didn't know when he said those words, how they were going to go. But so they went, they got Mr. Vatterott, big developer here, and asked him if he would pay the bill. And they brought out two old mothballed TWA planes. There were only 54 of us, and we had to fit into two planes, so you know they weren't big, they weren't jets. And we flew down there. The fella in the movie who seems to hover near Sister Roberta Schmidt and me, a tall, nice-looking guy, was the dean of the law school at St. Louis U. Childress. I sat next to him on that plane, and we were filling in one another on history, and he told me that in order for a black to get registered in Selma, he had to take a test. And he said to me, "Sister, I couldn't pass that test." I mean, the injustice was just so glaring. I loved it when Father Ouellette said, and they saw that little black man coming off it. My God, something's going to happen here. Sister Mary Antona is still going strong. She's in a wheelchair now. And she's 90. She beats me by 2 years. When we prepared this thing, the woman who did this, that Jaysari Hart, is a Hindu immigrant from India who came over as a teenager with her parents, landed in California, went to UCLA, majored in film, and started making documentaries. She was thinking of another idea for a and remembered back in India when she was in high school, working with some of Mother Teresa's sisters. Now she is today a practicing Hindu. But she knew, she remembered from reading that there were sisters connected with civil rights, and she did the research. I love the old Associated Press film that she got. I mean, it makes it so old black and white stuff. But the history there is so terrific. And so it was she who got us together, and she who interviewed people. Sister Ernest Marie, Sister Roberta Schmidt, was teaching sociology at the time. The three of us lived in Persimoni's house down at the corner. We were on the top floor. We were all writing our PhD dissertations or just getting them written. And Sister Ernest Marie got the call at 8 o'clock at night on Monday, the day after Bloody Sunday, saying that a group were going down to St. Louis. Bless those Loretta nuns. They're the ones that got Father Shockley to think about. Otherwise, I swear, that would have been an all-male group. As if the Roman Catholic Church in St. Louis was only male. Maybe it looks a little like that 49 years later, but anyway. They're the ones that said to Father Shockley, "Can we go?" And he thought, oh my gosh, why not? And then he called the St. Mary nuns, called that Sister Eugene, she's dead now, and asked if she would get another sister and come. And she went to Sister Antona, who said, "Why? Why would I go?" But anyway, she's a good scout, and so she came. And then Father Doyle remembered that Sister Roberta at Fontbonne had been, was a member of the Commission on Religion and Race. And so he called her and said, would you come down to Selma tomorrow? We didn't have time to write on the bulletin boards in our classrooms that we weren't going to be there. The kids all, I understand, they have told me. Of course, we had a lot of junior sisters. Remember the junior sisters here? We called you guys called the junior sisters the DARs. The damn average raisers. But anyway, all they did was study. So, Sister Roberta came to my door and asked me if I'd go down. Sure. I knew I had probably this much knowledge of what was going on, but I knew that if you can do some good, well then try to do a little good in life before you pass on. Back then, we didn't turn around much, that we didn't get permission for it. I can remember living here in Madai, which kept me sane while I was studying at St. Louis U. Sister Mary Terracine had heard that I was going to start my full-time PhD studies, and she invited me to come to Fontbonne and to live in Madai, to live with the girls. And when I think back on that, God bless her. Oh, it saved my sanity. I couldn't have studied all the time. And so to come home from St. Louis U reminds me, we always had to ask for money for the bus fare. And Sister Mary Victor used to give us the exact amount. Don't lose it. Oh my God. So I had been, I had a wonderful time, but when I was writing the dissertation, I moved over to St. Agnes so I wouldn't get distracted. So she comes and knocks on the door. She had called our provincial. Sister Joan Marie Gleason was one dandy nun. She was the youngest provincial we had ever had. Now, I'm an old philosopher, and I just love stuff like this, and I'd love it if you want to argue. When Sister Roberta got Sister Joan Marie on the phone and said, we've been called by the Chancery, and they're organizing a group of St. Louisans to go down and march in Selma tomorrow, do we have your permission to go? On her desk was a telegram from Bishop Tulin of Alabama. Alabama had so few Catholics, the whole state was one diocese. Did you hear the Rochester nuns, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, who worked there, say, the bishop told us that if we participated in any of those, we'd be on the first train home. Now, why did he do that? He was a nice fat guy. I mean, you saw his picture. But I'm sure he did it for safety. You know, people were killed from March, beginning in February. People were killed when the demonstrations began down there. On Sister Joan Marie's desk was a telegram from Bishop Tulin saying he had sent it to every major superior of every group that worked in Alabama, men and women. Dear Reverend Mother or Reverend Father or whatever, keep your people home. We'll take care of this problem. And Sister Joan Marie Gleason said to Roberta, go. Now let me tell you that my friend Aristotle, we used to study together. I am so old. But Aristotle and I, he used to tell me that there is a virtue. A virtue is a good habit. A virtue called epikeia. It's the ability to know when you can justify breaking the letter of the law in order to follow the spirit of the law. Can you condemn a man who steals a loaf of bread to feed his hungry family? He's not a thief by nature, but he sees that loaf of bread and his family is hungry and he steals it and feels no sin because he had exercised, as Aristotle would say, his epikeia. Sister Joan Marie, I doubt, ever went to a bishop in her life. She wasn't putting down the fact that bishops could ask you to do things. But this law needed to be broken this day. And she said, go. And we went. I love that story. It tells people who have spent their life doing ethics that you can never make good people by telling them to follow the rules. Rules are terribly important, but they're guidelines. And there comes a time when we've got to think about those guidelines before we act. We can't be blindly obedient and moral. I thought that was a marvelous thing. Anyway, when we went down there, the black, I always thought that people who had not known a lot of Catholics, looking at a habit, would go, oh my Lord, and remember oppression. What all the bad things that ever happened in the church? And that didn't happen in Selma. I couldn't have been wronger. I thought that we might be symbols to them of injustice or maleness or whatever. We were so warmly received by the people who they had been inundated since February. Now remember, this is 1965. This is 49 years ago. In December of '64, Martin Luther King had gotten the Nobel Peace Prize. On January the 2nd of '65, he had made an appeal to religious clergy and people of faith to help right the wrongs that were going on in Selma. That had started in January. And so by the time we got down there on March the 10th, they had had people in and out of Selma. As you saw, there were the pictures. When we walked into Brown Chapel, where we stayed for 2.5 hours before we even walked out and got stopped. We didn't march long. That was the most diversified group I've ever been in, I think. There were Harvard students. There were people dressed oddly. One of them was one of Martin Luther King's chief lieutenants, and he wore a funny little hat, and I shall never forget that hat. See, King had not been there that Sunday. He didn't expect the horror. He thought that the march, they were on their way to Montgomery. That's why they had their little things. And he thought that they'd be stopped. But Sheriff Jim Clark was put in charge, and he was terribly racist. And he had the Alabama Home Guard with their Confederate flags on their helmets. I said to somebody, don't get a ticket driving through this state. I mean, your picture is on too many things. There were people from all over, no nuns. We were the first nuns. That was the only thing, but then that opened up this thing, and then you had all those nuns. Our sister Barbara, who talked on there, came 2 days later. A whole group from Kansas City came with Norm Rodert and Sister Christine, somebody who has left our community, was standing next to Barbara. Norm Rodert is one of our good priests. He's now retired and getting a little, but anyway, he's a good man. He told me once that he and Pete Cole, who's left the priesthood, were walking the streets of Selma on, we went on the 10th, this would be March 12th, when they realized that behind them was a car with 4 adult males in it, each of them with his own rifle. Pete said, Father Norm Rodert said, we saw a bus stop about a block away with 2 black people waiting to catch the bus. And it was lighted. This was an evening. And I said to Pete Cole, let's head for that. Now, here are these 2 white guys with their Roman collars, and the car is following along behind them. And he said, we got to, and we realized that these 2 tired people waiting for a bus ride home really didn't need to have a couple of white guys causing a little friction to go on. And the car passed them. So he said, we didn't stay with them long. We turned around because we were spending the night at Good Samaritan Hospital. We turned around and we started, and the car came around the block and followed them to the hospital. No bloodshed. Once I was doing one of these things in Kansas City, and the guy who was interviewing me was so disappointed because we didn't have bloodshed. Didn't you get hurt, sister? No, sorry. Those sisters who had served in Selma and made the church so present in Selma, you hate seeing them old and crotchety and whatever. One of them dying of cancer. She's dead now. And the little BVM who did the 54-mile walk at the end of March, she was the one with the thing on, and I'm sure she was dying of cancer. I hate cancer. My gosh, everybody. Those nuns, we get a lot of hoo-hoo-hoo. But those are the nuns who ought to get medals on their chests. They worked there. And as they said, they felt proud to be part of the movement, even though they stayed in their hospitals. When we went to, after we all knelt down and we said the Our Father together, and then we sang We Shall Overcome, and then it was probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the nuns at Good Samaritan Hospital asked the 54 St. Louisans if they'd like to come for lunch. Now, isn't that humane and gentle, nice? I mean, here's this city, and it is just rife with tension. Martin Luther King, who couldn't be there, because the first Sundays in black parishes are special. They're almost like Yom Kippur. And he had said, I have missed so many Sunday, I want to stay with my group in Atlanta. And so he had placed in the hands of the Reverend Anderson, who had been the pastor at Brown's Chapel, the cohesion of the people who live there. I get really very idealistic here, some of the discussion, and I say, I looked around that crowd and I thought racism in the United States is dead. Dear Lord. And then we have Ferguson. But anyway, we got a lot of work to do. Does anybody say something? Say something.
Racism not being dead. We go to the jail once a month.
You go where?
To a county jail near us.
Oh, do you? Mm-hmm. Oh, how neat.
Yes, we bring children's books and the inmates read for us to record the book to each of their children. And we send the book and the recording.
Neat.
But so many are black and Hispanic.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, but that's still wonderful.
Because you did for
Yeah,
us.
yeah, and thank you. How nice. But as I said to somebody this morning, it was serendipity. We happened to be at the right place, at the right time, and everything, like Joan Marie, she could have said, stay home.
You said yes, though. That's what made it.
I will give you a little piece of advice from an 88-year-old nun. I am scared to death that when I die, now I've tried to live a good life, honest. I'm going to get up there, and God is going to say to me, Flanigan, didn't you see something? What are we doing? We do not live in a just culture. What are we letting pass? I thought of slavery. How long did it take our church until we decided that slavery was a sin? And today, there is more slavery going on in the U.S. of A. than there was at the time of the Civil War. I read that someplace. Yeah. It's women and children primarily today. But what are we? We've got to be so aware. We've got to be so conscious of all sorts of injustices, and you can't rise up and yell about all of them, but you can do your part. That is certainly true. Thank you. Bye-bye. Woo! Woo, 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 woo. Oh. Oh, excuse me. Good luck.